Jason Burmis here, and I got a really special show for you today. As you know, we've tried to be at the forefront of the Jeffrey Epstein research. And about a week and a half ago, I'm pretty sure right around the time of the arrest, maybe a day or so after, I got a DM from Johnny Vedmore, the article of this The Swamp Media article, talking about a woman named Nicole Junkerman who ends up on the flight manifest, at least according to his research, twice. And one of those times alone with Epstein. And he makes some pretty amazing connections. And with Vicky Ward saying, hey, Acosta said he was intelligence to the Trump transition team. And then, lo and behold, the next day they find a passport supposedly of Austrian origin with stamps in France, the UK, Saudi Arabia, and Spain throughout the 80s with an alias, giving even more credence that this man was, in fact, intelligence. We've got to go to Johnny Vedmore for the scoop on this one. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, Jason. Nice to be on. I'm really happy to be on your show, man. You're a great dude doing good things.
Well, thank you, brother. And you're doing good things. I know it's tough out there with the independent media. But what I really liked about this article is it wasn't just hobnobbed together. It looked like you put some real time and effort, not only writing this thing, but researching it. So let's start from the beginning. How do you come across Junkerman and kind of make her the focus of this article?
Well, Junkerman's an interesting one. I'm surprised no one else kind of clocked onto her beforehand. Anybody noticed her? I'm sorry if I use the UK colloquial terms here. She's an extremely interesting woman. Her past is extremely interesting, and yet she's on the flight manifest for Jeffrey Epstein, and no one really talks about her. She was really an unusual trip for Epstein, because Epstein tends to travel with his entourage, or he brings people to him. He didn't tend to travel with business people alone. He was always with someone that he knew from his circles, some of the girls, etc., and some of the people like Maxwell and the like. So it was noticeable that on the flight manifest there was a difference in his normal routine and in his normal pattern of behavior when he met up with Nicole Junkerman, who was, at this time, this is 2002, and the first time they met, it was with there was another guy on a plane. I think his name's Billy Kim or something. But it's the next time, the second time, where they take the plane from Paris to Birmingham. They spend what is really a weekend, like 2-3 days or whatever, in Birmingham, and then fly back to Paris. And that was unusual for Junkerman to come out of his routine. And so I thought, well, that's how I kind of look for things. On the independent media, we have to look for things that the mainstream media will refuse to cover, or maybe too dangerous for them, or maybe too risky for their careers, etc. So we've got to look for those type of bits of information. So the fact that no one was talking about, and this was a few years ago now, I mean at least 3-4 years ago. So it was surprising she wasn't anywhere on anyone's radar. And at first I thought, I'll just sit down, have a look at her. But I was also interested in how her relationship with big business, etc., how she originally to meet Epstein, to come across him. And I the only way to do it was really to build up her career, have a look at what she was saying and doing beforehand. And I'm really trying to get an expose on her, really.
And, this is an attractive woman. Let's not shun that away. I really do feel like intelligence services, especially when they're dealing with women, hey, physical attraction is a big move by these players, right? And she almost looks like she could have been one of Epstein's girls 10 years or 20 years prior. I mean, she has that young blonde girl look that you see in Virginia Roberts and some of the other accusers out there. I'm not saying that she is. I'm just saying that this woman is extremely powerful as well. You know, she's not just attractive; she's the whole package. She gets rid of what is it, Winamax, which is some kind of a football betting app or something like
this
that.
This was in 1998. It's like a gaming app that was before regulations came on gaming app. This was like 1998, and this is when she is graduating from. She sells that business on when she's graduating from first university, which was the University of Monte Carlo. So that is not just a small university. That's a rich university. That's a lot of rich and powerful people hang out in Monaco and Monte Carlo. I've been there once. I got paid to go over there, and it was just completely and utterly another world. It was all supercars everywhere. The women were all 7 foot tall. She has ex-model. Nicole Junkerman has ex-model in her credentials. So I suppose she did this before she was doing the business with Winamax. So just before she went to University of Monte Carlo. But she is obviously she's a looker. She's aged well. I would say that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, if you go back to the Maria Farmer claims, where she says she was working for Epstein in the New York, established in the mid 90s, 95, through I think maybe 2002. I know the new indictment is 2002 to 2005 at that same residence. But Farmer says there were underage models there all the time. And this is also where she says she saw Dershowitz going upstairs when Dershowitz says he didn't even know him at that time. So, and, you know, Maria Farmer, she says that not only was she assaulted by Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein at Wexner's home, but her younger underage sister at the time was, in fact, also molested by Epstein. I mean, there's just so many court cases going on. It's really hard to keep up with it all. So how did you, and you know, aside from the flight manifest, how did you focus in on this? And let's start getting to the significance of this woman.
Okay. Well, she is interesting straight away to me because after Monte Carlo and after selling her first business when she's just graduating from her first degree, so this seems like a woman who's already had some form of influence in her life, some sort of money to invest. She's already a big player on what is the digital scene, the rising tech scene. She goes off then to do a management development course at Harvard University. Of course, you know, their own connections with Epstein, where he donated in 2003 30 million to them. The meeting on the plane on the Lolita Express, as they call it, that meeting was just as she had finished her degree at Harvard and as she was about to purchase Infront Sports Media. So around that time, she's young, she's professional, she's just coming out of Harvard. It's very likely, in my own opinion, that Epstein was maybe recruiting her for something. Young talent already is something you can find from big places like Harvard. But I haven't actually, what you were just saying there is very interesting because I haven't really looked in to what Nicole Junkerman did before her careers. Various different investments and additions to her portfolio and where she's been and all of the different corruptions she's been involved in. I've been looking at that side of it. I've been looking at the future. I've not been looking at the past, which is something I normally do in articles, but I didn't do in this case. And I would be very, very interested to find out when Nicole Junkerman first met Epstein, because that would queue up with her being a teenager in the same time that you're talking right there.
And let's not forget, you know, Epstein lured a lot of these girls with promises of the Fashion Institute of Technology or modeling gigs through Wexner. In fact, some of the employees that were named in the Jane Doe 43 lawsuit, Leslie Graf, who was it, Sarah Kellen, and then Natasha Marcinkova, I think her last name was. I always Malashev. I'm sorry. Her in particular, Malashev. When I tried to find her, she was still in the fashion world in Brooklyn as we speak. But she said that she had like 3 different aliases. And back in 2009, 2010, when the heat was on, a lot of these women, and who presumably other people who worked for Epstein, ended up taking new names and new identities because this case was so involved and far-reaching.
Yeah. And one thing I want to note to people who are watching, who are other people who investigate, who want to do kind of this stuff, gather evidence, and this is what it's about. It's about gathering factual evidence. Should have a look at karensmodels.com, the John Luke Brunel link. That was where they were recruiting young girls, because that never actually finished. After the Sweetheart deal, they just changed the domain name of the site. And if you can go to the Wayback Machine and search for that website, the karensmodels.com, which comes up in the notebook, the little black book, you will find further evidence of the other people that they may have been recruiting at some time or another. There's so much information out there that people haven't even come close to yet.
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned Brunel, because last night I was doing an AMA with my audience, and they're great. And they had sent me one PDF file, which was 819 pages of parts of depositions. You know, we're slowly getting a lot of these court cases. And the woman, I believe her name was Angela Rose, pointed out to me that I think it was Brunel, had been accused. Basically, Bradley Edwards was grilling one of the pilots. And he was saying to him, were you the one that flew 3 French girls who were 12 years old and did not speak English as a gift to Epstein, and then back the next night? I mean, these things are incredible. How does somebody like Junkerman, say, fit into this with her intelligence ties? Because you've talked about the Mossad at length, and we know that Epstein, even when he was trying to defend the passport, had his lawyers say, well, he's heavily Jewish and deep in that faith, and he didn't want the terrorists to get him. And then you have Ehud Barak, who's in a political battle with Netanyahu right now, being photographed there in New York in 2016, well after everybody knows who Epstein is.
And they're already out being blatant about everything they do. They don't hide what they do, or they haven't been hiding what they've been doing, which is quite incredible, because you'd think that with all of the heat and the pressure that it would continue. For us in the independent media, we've believed that it would continue. For them, they believe that it will just go away, that it'll just disappear. But it seems to be to me that every generation doesn't realize that in 15, 20 years, all your secrets now are going to be out in the open somehow. Someone you know or something you've done will be uncovered in 15, 20 years' time, and those links will all be able to be made at that time. I think people don't realize that's been happening every generation in the past as well. The present seems to distract people from the fact that history remains. As far as Nicole Junkerman, she and her connection to all of this, because she went on to to take over a company called Infront Sports, which bidded for put in a bid for the rights for FIFA World Cup in 2006. Now, this was around the same time she was meeting with Epstein, so there could be a possibility that he was one of the other investors, because he invested in lots of different things. We're all aware that he liked to hang around with big players as well, so it could just be something like that. But it was a lot of money she managed to get for that, and she had done it by putting the chief executive of Infront Sports Media, her company, as Philip Blatter, who's Sepp Blatter's nephew, who's the guy who runs the whole of FIFA. So it was like a corrupt bidding process straight away. So that when I was investigating, if you've come across one point of corruption, that's already interesting, and it gives cause for concern and more investigation. She had then started purchasing other companies. After she had obviously made her money, she was really into investing in companies. So she didn't buy just one or two companies. By 2011, she had like a relatively big portfolio, maybe like 10 different companies. But after that time, that just expanded massively. She bought up a lot of startup tech firms, some including like Sentinel Technologies, which works with AI, Grok Systems, which is about machine learning and etc. And she starts buying some of the really, or investing in some of the really big emerging tech companies. And this continued and continued. But one of those tech companies, when I first investigated it, was a thing called Reporty, Homeland Security, which is an ominous name in itself. And that has now become Carbine 911. You can go to carbine911.com. You can see what they're talking about. And what it is an app where you basically need the emergency services. You need a fireman, you need an ambulance, or you need a policeman. And instead, something's happening in front of you, and instead of phoning them directly, you report it through this app, and then that sends all the information about all of the things going on, including from your camera phone, your locations, all of the smart technology around. That sends all of the details to the police or the fire brigade who are responding. That means, of course, they would have access to every single piece of data that the emergency service has access to. And the rollout of it is quite interesting, because they seem to be looking to start it off in New York rather than starting off anywhere else, do something big. But the people on the board of directors, Nicole Junkerman is one of the directors. Ehud Barak is the chairman of the board. You've got Amir Elikai, who's ex-IDF. You have a brigadier, Pinchas Bukris. He's ex-IDF 8200 cyber intelligence unit. So he's like the ex-commander of the cyber intelligence unit. So he's like the top, one of the top dogs. You've got Alex Dizengov, who works in anti-cyber attack stuff. But these are big boys. And you've got an American on the board of directors as well on this company called Elliot Tarwell. Elliot Tarwell is very interesting because he's the American on the board, and he's a businessman in the who knows the 5 boroughs of New York very well. And that seems to be where they're focusing on, trying to start implementing this technology, encourage people for the future to, instead of calling the emergency service, send all their data to a company owned by the Israeli IDF-linked woman, Nicole Junkerman, and her colleagues, who include the ex-prime minister and a head of operations for the IDF. It's quite astounding.
And you know what? When we talk about Israeli intelligence, aside from all those aspects you just brought up, right? And aside from the Epstein thing, when you look at his right hand, Ghislaine Maxwell, and her father, Robert Maxwell, the Israeli super spy, just that should invoke concern, especially because even by Dershowitz' own account, he was introduced to Epstein and Maxwell at the same time by the Lady Rothschild. And
it's completely unbelievable.
And again, who knows whether that's true or not, but Maxwell himself as a spy supposedly is the one that got the Promise software. As we talk about big data, the track trace database society we live in now, people have to understand.
It's all about data.
Yes, Promise was that software in the 90s. Promise and Carnivore were the main softwares being used by the intel community to go through phone conversations, look for keywords, and track, trace, and database those. So the idea that Maxwell got that and then supposedly gave it off to Israeli intelligence, further goes into the idea that later on they want more big data, they want more access to data here in the United States, and this is a company that could absolutely provide that, Mr. Vedmore.
Oh yes, most definitely. And I mean, she's gone on. At this point, when I was investigating, it was already obvious that she was. They're up to no good. You can say they're up to no good for sure. The links are and the multiple points of corruption. But then she comes up in the Panama Papers, linked to Copeland Securities. So she has another bit of public corruption, and nobody kind of like really noticed and linked it all together. And this company Carbine isn't her only venture into big data, in my opinion, because she is also on something in the UK called the Health Tech Advisory Board, which is just been set up by MP Matt Hancock to advise on the future of tech and what tech will be needed, in my opinion, so that they can sell off all of the tech to our socialist system as soon as possible, to even before people know they need it. They use something called technology evangelists, who basically look for the tech that is going to be needed in the future but isn't quite there yet. And they convince big companies to make those things. She's on that advisory board, and her place on the advisory board means that she's right next to the patient data. And one of her companies, Oaken, the head of that, is also on the has also been put on this advisory board to the NHS, and he owns Oaken is an AI technology company, so it deals in the future of AI, and both those people have been quite happy and open in saying that they're going to have access to all of the data from the UK people using the UK NHS, which is every single person in the UK. So where they come from, to what is wrong with them, and what injuries or illnesses they've ever had in their life, and all of those details.
And aside from the Epstein case, one of the stories that I did last week is the prevalence now of microchipping in Sweden, where they are becoming a cashless society outright, talking about it. And this is the next step. And yes, a lot of people choose to have their medical data on these chips. Now, for those that don't want them in a chip, or maybe are behind 5, 10, 20 years down the line in this process, this is a great tool to get all that medical information and then have that big data to then sell to corporations so they know what premiums to charge you. Basically, to have you by the balls in any kind of situation if you were to need medicine or something to survive, and say, hey, this is what you're going to have to pay for. Yet another form of control. I guess my next question is there going to be any accountability for women like this, or any intelligence connections to Epstein? I mean, there's a lot of talk of, everybody I've talked to, including myself, we're shocked he got arrested in the first place, right? And now the talk from everybody is suicided, dying, not going to be able to talk. The fact of the matter is, if these documents are unsealed in the next couple of days, which they're supposed to be, allegations are going to fly everywhere. Names are going to be named. Locations are going to be there. You don't even really need Epstein to talk. So to me, that's almost a moot point. So I guess, where do you think it's going to go?
Well, me personally, I'm currently looking at trying to track down where he was for that weekend with Nicole Junkerman and what he was actually doing. And there are people who were in his little black book, and of course, all who live nearby Birmingham, because it's a very specific airport to go to Birmingham. If you want to go to London, you go use one of the London airports. Want to go to Manchester, etc. So there's an MP that lives quite close, who's the first person to look at for that, a guy called Philip Dunn, MP, who's one of our members of Parliament for an area called Ludlow, and has a family history going back 400 odd years, and has also been on the arms procurement section of our defence board, our Ministry of Defence. He basically was in charge of trying to implement plans to buy arms and equipment from other countries. So obviously he's an interesting link, and he's a good example of what is going to happen in this case now, because all of these names have to be looked through. All of these names that are connected with Epstein, and all of the ones that will come out in the future, will all have to. Everybody on the independent media have to go and look into everybody who is named, because the mainstream media will not do it, and they'll keep feeding us the same information that we already know. So there's going to be a lot of information out, and I think what's going to happen is that somewhere along the lines, one of those connections, one of those links, is really going to seal it for Epstein, that there's no point in even suiciding him anymore. That all of the information is out, and they're going to have to deal with the consequences.
Well, I certainly hope you're right, and a lot of people have called this the litmus test to whether or not we're ever going to get our country back or our world back. You know, I mean,
I'm optimistic, but that's because I want to be optimistic. I could really be cynical because we've got all of the evidence of the past is that these things will be covered up, that they will try every dirty trick in the book, but they do not. They are unable to account for the internet. They're always looking into the future or the past, replicating the past. They're not living in the present. And the way that technology moves nowadays is all very much about the present. And they're not on that bandwagon yet, these big boys.
No, I tend to agree with you that it is technology that's moving us forward. It's the only way I'm able to bring this information. You know, it's a double-edged sword. We can talk about the censorship of Google and YouTube all day, but right now, through their technology, we're broadcasting to the entire planet in 1080p this information, unfiltered and uncensored, to an audience that's going to share it with others. And that is our power. You know, information is our power, and how we can try to hold these people accountable. Johnny, why don't you tell people how they can help you out, where the website is, and finish up with anything else you think is really important in this case that's being overlooked.
All right. For me, you can go to johnnyvedmore.com and linked to any of my stories, my major investigations, not my own opinion pieces, will be on the homepage. So johnnyvedmore.com is pretty easy to find. Some of those links will lead you to a brilliant platform called vocal.media that has loads of different magazines that allow people like me and in the independent media to actually publish the stuff that can so that we can actually have a professional platform to publish these things on. So I advise anybody, those guys have been really good, and you really need a base. You need somewhere to start off. There's a lot of people out there who are desperate to bring information to people, but they don't know how to start, and the only way to start is get to learn to use the basic tools. The Wayback Machine is a fantastic piece of it's wondrous for investigating. Don't think you can't approach people and ask people questions. Though be aware that there is going to be a point where people will ask why you're asking questions with any subject. With Epstein, the Karen's model, I'm just going to have a little look here. Karen'sModels.com is somewhere that people should be focusing in on, because that's about encouraging people who have been through this process to come out as well. And I'm not talking about harassing people. That would be a terribly bad idea. But there is loads more to come. And as the links grow bigger and the connections get wider, we will all need to work together to share that information out. Don't be afraid to share out information, is one thing I say to everybody. If anybody needs any help with anything as well, you can contact me at the site, and I'm really happy to help.
And guys, the link to the article we discussed here is in the description. I want to thank Johnny Vedmore for joining me. I want to remind everybody we're doing 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 videos a day sometimes, not only on Epstein. We do it on the CIA, the Deep State, Bilderberg, Bohemian Grove, biometrics, the Technopoly, and much more. So join the brigade if you haven't. And I've got a GoFundMe. That's how we're doing it. We're 5 days deep. We're already almost a fifth of the way there for the month, which is awesome, guys. We're going to have this grow. And one more time, I want to thank Johnny Vedmore. I will see you guys all on the flip side.
Okay.